So a lot of people pick them up and they go, well, this is a shirt. And I understand the micro loading, but it doesn't feel like a lot. To which we always say, well, just put it on and go do your workout, whatever your workout is. And, if someone loves to run, go for a run, they'll throw it on. And after 3 miles, they go, I would not believe that just adding 2 pounds would make such a big difference, but it does.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Stefan Olander, co-founder and CEO of OMORPHO. In this episode, we discuss the company's MicroLoaded weighted apparel. Stefan shares lessons learned from more than 20 years at Nike. Plus, we talk about the challenges and opportunities in defining a new category. Let's get into it. Hi, Stefan. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, excited to chat today. I think, I've gotten to learn a little bit about the brand and what you're working on, and I'm certainly excited about it and interested to learn more. And I thought this would be a cool opportunity to introduce it to the audience as well. So to kick things off, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background and what you were working on at OMORPHO?
Yeah, well, Nike, I was spent over 2 decades at Nike and had it's phenomenal opportunity with a phenomenal brand to learn a lot, experience a lot. Started in the Nordics. I moved to Holland, the European head office, and came to the US in 2004 and to the global campus here. And in 2017, I decided that it's time to do something a little bit different or very different, but and especially without a safety net. And that became sort of the genesis of what is OMORPHO today, and something that was sparked from an idea I had a day during a workout.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that. I mean, obviously coming from like the big dog, right? Nike, you kind of get a chance to see it all, and in many ways, a lot of innovations that are coming through there and that they've introduced and could continue to introduce. And you're kind of sitting back and thinking, were you watching internally thinking, hey, how do I do my own thing? Maybe what is that opportunity in the market? You say it was inspired by, a workout that you had yourself. What was that initial spark, right? Like, this is the idea. And how did you get to work on actually bringing that to life?
Yeah, it's funny. People ask me, well, when you had the idea, wouldn't you first bring it to Nike? And it didn't come about that way. I think when you are, at least for me, as long as you're working somewhere, you're going to put 110% of your attention and interest to that. And for me, that was really important when I was at Nike. And got to drive the digital innovation teams and create some pretty amazing innovations that we brought to the world. But always had this desire inside me to create for myself, and it had nothing to do with not being there. But you're curious as a creator to go, well, what if I didn't have this amazing safety net and these resources that we have and all this capital that you have in a big corporation, and just go try something different. So the embryo of the idea came to me when I was there, but it wasn't until I left Nike where I really decided that this is what I want to do. And then went all in and was able to surround myself with an amazing team. And the idea is really simple. I mean, you know about it, the viewers don't. So maybe I should share that first so we know what it is we're talking about. But in essence, when I ran the digital innovation teams, we got to test everything that was coming out. We had a gym where we would try out, whether it was CrossFit came out, Peloton came out, P90X came out, whatever it was, we would try it, evaluate it, assess it, and see how could we apply it. And a friend of mine brought along a weighted vest for a workout. We did the Murph, and I had never worked out with a weighted vest. It's a very different experience. Have you tried one?
Yeah, you talk about Murph. In a former life, I was a CrossFit trainer and athlete. We owned a CrossFit gym, so we had weighted vests laying around everywhere throughout the whole gym, and not like the best use, right, necessarily of equipment or space at all times. So yeah, familiar.
You also know it's a pretty clunky experience. And most of them are really uncomfortable. The look is really, they're designed in a very aggressive way. And there hasn't been really, and also they've never been designed specifically for women. So for me, I did the workout and I felt something different. I was like, this is amazing. When you load your body with external weight close to your center of gravity, great things happen. But why isn't this a bigger category? Why is no one thinking of this? And the irony was, as I was doing this workout with it, I thought to myself, it's remarkable when you look at the physiological benefits of the right load in the right places. We call it microloading with OMORPHO, but You get tremendous gains from this, but no one is using it. And it just became this for me, like, why is that? And what struck me was most sports brands are obsessing lightweight because it's very intuitive. And most of them, like Nike, is founded on the whole idea that lighter is always better because the ounce you take out of a piece of footwear or clothing is an ounce that the athlete doesn't have to carry when they're competing. And that's absolutely true when they're competing, which is about, for most people, 1% of the time, or maybe 5% of the time, 95% of the time, you're training. And the only way to get better when you're training is to add resistance, whether you're adding resistance through weights that you're carrying or on a bike or so it struck me that the reason no one had really gone into this space was because they're so focused on lightweight, 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 like take every ounce out. And so it became our approach, which is obviously different than what we believe a big category.
Yeah, it's even looking at. I haven't had a chance to use the apparel yet, but even looking at it, like much different look, much different vibe from like the brand perspective. And your T-shirt has on there the Gravity Sportswear, and I've seen it described as like the kind of micro beads or micro weights that are resistant, different levels of resistance, right? So in terms of the kind of product line and what people can expect and even what's available now, like is it different weights that are different pieces of equipment? Are all the pieces of equipment different weights? How do you think about like that kind of portfolio of the apparel?
Yeah, what's really interesting about gravity sportswear is that there is a range, right? So the science I described is called MicroLoad. And the idea behind microloading is that you don't go as far as as a CrossFit trainer, it's 15 pounds or 20 pounds, and you're adding a lot of load, which makes it very hard to move naturally, move the way you're intended to move. So with microloading, we're only looking at about 1 to 5% of your body mass that we load, but we distribute it ergonomically. And so our vest, which is this was the starting point for this, is 10 pounds for men and 6 pounds for women, which is slightly less than most weighted vests are, but it's way more comfortable, way more versatile, and it doesn't put unnecessary strain, on your joints and your tendons. So but then the collection is broader than that. So our apparel, for instance, our long sleeve tops are 2 pounds. Our tights are about 2 pounds. So that in itself doesn't feel like a lot. So a lot of people pick them up and they go, well, this is a shirt. And I understand the micro loading, but it doesn't feel like a lot. To which we always say, well, just put it on and go do your workout, whatever your workout is. And if someone loves to run, go for a run, they'll throw it on and after 3 miles to go, I would not believe that just adding 2 pounds would make such a big difference, but it does. And we see tremendous gains. So you can burn up to 8% more calories. You can get up to 3% faster. You can jump up to 8% higher just by adding the right load in the right places and work out as you are intended to, but it gives you a little bit more intensity when you're doing it. So that's why it's a completely novel collection with things that you just put on as you would, because you're wearing clothes anyway. You wash them the same way, you wear them the same way, you just get more effect from your workout.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, right? That you think about it's not that much weight, and so how could these 1 pound or 3 pounds, whatever, have that much of an impact? But on the flip side of that, think about how much time even brands like Nike or others spend trying to take out an ounce or a couple ounces, right? Or a pound from that. So when you think about it that way, it's like, oh, obviously there's something to that if it does matter enough that they would take it away in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you think about the difference between the heaviest shoe 20, 30, 40 years ago and the lightest shoe now, that's way less than the 2 pounds we're able to add, in our top. So you're absolutely right.
And so from that perspective, you talked about having a chance to, test everything and try everything and see what was there. And I'm sure as you start down the path of this idea, like what would it look like to add the kind of micro weight beyond that in terms of, hey, you obviously feel it when you're wearing it and you work out and people come back and they say, wow. But what type of kind of research or studies have you done to this point that's like, hey, these are the outcomes that we can expect from an athlete can benefit from this, from an everyday kind of fitness seeker can expect to see. I think even myself thinking about it when I go downstairs in my gym and put the weight vest on, it's like I can tell my body's moving differently when I have that right kind of excessive 15, 20 pound vest on. So thinking about how I just even move more comfortably and naturally when I might be wearing even 10 pounds as opposed to 20, right? What other benefits are people getting, and how are you kind of educating people on like why they would want to use this apparel?
Yeah, what's so interesting with this, our head of science, Dr. Aaron Fazer, has spent years researching this and the science behind microloading and small weights in the right places can have great effect. And it's something that we're convinced is going to get more and more attention because whether you're an elite athlete looking to shave off a tenth of a second to an everyday athlete who just want to maximize your workout and get more from the minutes you put in, this works. And the reason we know it works is it's scientifically backed. So it's not us making up claims about this. There are several white papers that have been written, peer reviewed, as well as our own research that we've done that allow us to make these claims and substantiate these claims. So we have a whole section on our website, omorpho.fit, where we share those, where you can go in and see what methodology was used when running these tests and with athletes. So that's the scientific side where we can show these absolute percentages. But then it's the emotional side. And that's what we refer to as the OMORPHO effect. Because we know this from working with athletes for so many years, at Nike is no matter how much you prepare, everyone else is going to try to prepare as much. And sometimes it doesn't just come down to physiologically how you are, it comes down to, your mindset. I'll never forget this. I remember, I don't know if you remember Michael Johnson, sprinter, obviously a legendary 200 and 400 meter sprinter. Nike made a gorgeous gold spike for him, which was the lightest shoe ever made. But Michael wore a gold necklace that was pretty sturdy, and the necklace itself was heavier than the shoes. So imagine how these teams have been working on removing all this weight. But that weight was on his feet, right? And they're obviously moving much faster. But what was as important was the feeling of I had already won before the race begun because I'm wearing a pair of gold shoes. You've now established this with the other runners. So for Amorpho, we talk about through the lens of the Amorpho effect. Because when you put on our stuff, you obviously feel something. But when you take it off, that sensation of being lighter, being quicker, being stronger is something that's pretty a remarkable effect. So it's the combination of the scientifically proven pieces that we have with the addition of the mental edge that you get from feeling I'm a little bit more prepared than the others. So one of our ambassadors, Ayla Tomljanovic, amazing tennis player who just won against Serena at US Open last weekend, she talks about it as her secret weapon. Basically, because you wear it when you're training, and when you take it off, you feel like I'm a little bit lighter and I put in a little bit more work than the others. So that's what's behind that.
Yeah, it's super important, right? To have that, whether you think of it as a competitive advantage or even a psychological advantage, to have that kind of in the toolkit for an athlete or just anybody who's trying to improve. I'd be interested to hear getting this up and running. And you can talk about, I probably should have asked earlier on how long it's been to this point in terms of, hey, we have something in production, it is available to sell. As you're thinking about continuing to go to market, acquire customers, is it purely direct to consumer? Are you thinking about it as online only, or are you looking at, hey, how do we get and expand that retail footprint? How are you getting it in front of people? I think is the kind of punchline, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we started this in 2018 and we launched it publicly last November. So we're not even a year old. So it took 3 years to develop this, which, it may look easy, but there are many steps to creating stuff that is both functional and beautiful. And durable and washable, etc. So that was about 3 years until we launched. And yes, we are a direct to consumer model, predominantly 95%. And the reason for that is we think we can serve our consumers better if we have a direct relationship. We can understand what their needs are and serve them better. But we also have a great partnership both with Equinox and Carbon 38 that are selling our products as well. So we do want with strategic and the right retailers, we think that's an opportunity for people to see, feel, touch the product. It's hard to convey this through a screen, right? You really want to find a place where you can touch it. So there are benefits to direct consumers, but obviously retail is important as well. So But the business model itself is really for us to be able to predominantly have a direct relationship with our consumer.
Yeah, and then when it comes to continuing to expand, you mentioned, being not even a year old at this point. Do you think about this as exclusively or entirely the kind of weighted apparel? Or is it, hey, we want to develop an entire kind of lifestyle brand around this? We want to have everyday stuff that may or may not be weighted. How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, we think that's a tremendous opportunity. I mean, our team is remarkable. It's like I'm so happy and thankful to have very talented people with extensive experience in the industry. So we start our sharp point, obviously, is everything we do around gravity sportswear and our G Vest. But obviously, we see potential, and people come to us and they go, "Hey, this is great. You've got me covered in training. I want to be with you during competition as well." So there may be some stuff coming there as well.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye out. And I kind of asked that obviously from the standpoint of like the broader, and I wouldn't put you in this category, but like athleisure or activewear more broadly, right? Can be pretty crowded, super competitive. Obviously, you have folks like Nike who have kind of a major claim to that market. But when you think about differentiating, there's companies that have come along in various ways and can kind of said, hey, we cater to the maybe outdoor adventure sports segment of this audience, or we cater to the CrossFit portion of this audience. When it comes to saying, hey, we have like a wedge or a true differentiator into the active wear or athletic wear more broadly, this piece is certainly a huge point to stand out. How do you think about like, hey, what is the market? Who is this customer? And how ultimately do we convey that beyond like the once you see it or feel it, right? There is something to it. And there's kind of that, hey, you recognized there's a need here or an unmet, need. But how big is it in general? And how do you think about continuing to like broaden that scope over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that to your point, I think it's really hard, especially as a direct to consumer brand, to break through unless you have a clear point of distinction. Because it is crowded, to your point, and then most others would compete with price, which is hard too, for a startup if you don't have volume. But this didn't start off as can we make the biggest business. It started with how can we serve a need. And it comes from us being, athletes, loving sports, loving to train, and then realizing that, wait a minute, there's a better way to train. And when you start with a true insight that resonates with yourself and us as we're developing these prototypes before we launched, we wouldn't go work out without it because we were like, that's a wasted workout if I didn't get the full effect of it that I could get using gravity sportswear. So when you start there, you know that you have something. And when we tried that, we had early on when we brought in wear testers and we gave it to athletes and trainers, and they were like, wow, this is really interesting and different. Then it's easier to apply the business sense to that then and say, okay, now we know we need to develop a robust supply chain and have a platform that works and make sure that we've solved everything on our ability to portray this as a compelling brand. But your foundational starting point needs to be bring something to the table that helps, makes people's lives better. And what we saw was this amazing thing that said there are millions, hundreds of millions of people working out every single day and they're missing out. And then when you have that feeling, it's like, we just got to figure out a way to bring this to market. And I think that was sort of the steps from the insights that we had such deep belief in because we were using it ourselves. I always used to say when at Nike, you got to be a super user. You can't be sitting there developing something to some imaginary target audience. It's not working as well as when you're truly a passionate user of what it is you're bringing to the table and really believe and understand that that can be something that's better than what's out there today. So that became our starting point as a brand and how we developed it and why we're so excited for this becoming an entirely new category. Because once you start using it, you don't stop.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that's interesting about this is like being kind of pioneer, right, and bringing this to market in the way that you have. Do you think of it as like, oh, in some way, shape, or form, and you may, have protected right how you go about the design and the gravity sportswear the way that you're doing it, but it's like, is it a matter of time before other brands are like, hey, we need to figure out how to do the micro resistance, and this is going to be an entire category that everybody's going to be into, or do you see this as a situation where you've done it so exceptionally well and potentially have protected it that they want to license that from you? You want to partner with people on that? How does that category evolve?
I am convinced that we're creating a category, and in that category are going to see a lot of other players are going to enter into it. But the way this works generally is, as a big established brand, you're going to sit and watch, and you're going to say, "Is this going anywhere?" And we know it is because we're seeing the traction and the consumer response and the athlete response. But it's not until it's sizable enough for it to make the agenda with other brands, because people are busy. They have packed innovation pipelines and, with other things. But we welcome that. I think that it's a tremendous opportunity when more players come into this. We have IP around this, both through the lens of patents as well as through trademarks. But I think that for us, it's more important to do the best we can to bring a solution that we love to the consumer, and do that to establish the category. And as more people come into this, we welcome that. High tide, all boats rise. So I think the most important thing is to be the category leader. And this has happened in many other instances, obviously. So what Under Armour did with base layer, and I think Lululemon did successfully starting off with yoga. And you pick a lane, and then you use that, as you said, as your wedge, and you expand from there.
Yeah, even as you were talking about it, beyond the kind of apparel category, I've talked to a couple times on the podcast the team at Hyperice. What they've done in many ways is like this recovery, the being able to strap on the cooling or heating, and then you see guys like LeBron James who are like, "Hey, I pretty much exclusively use this. Have gone on to invest in the company, what have you, but." Then bring it directly to the team, and they're saying like, "You have to buy this. Like, we need this for the team." Do you anticipate getting into the kind of professional or collegiate ranks where you're outfitting teams and selling directly to them?
Yeah, I mean, we already are in sports. We have a number of tremendous NFL players that have come to us because athletes intuitively understand this. You don't have to explain to an elite athlete; they get it in 2 seconds. Julio Jones was one of our first ambassadors, and unbelievable football player, but also someone who works out all the time. And since then, a number of other tremendous athletes: Alexander Matheson, DJ Dallas, Britt Covey, are coming on board. And then what happens, to your point, I think that especially in the off season, as all these athletes in all sports, whether it's basketball, football, you name it, that's when you're training. And that's when someone sees something new and they go, wait a minute, is there an edge here? And that then leads quickly into it. And I think so for us, team sales obviously is interesting. There's a slightly longer process there because it's got to be vetted by trainers, and but we are very excited by the opportunity to work directly with teams because they see the opportunity. And especially in the build up, in the preseason build up, when training is such a fundamental part of what gets them ready for the season, that we're a great complement to what they're already doing.
Yeah, you talked about developing, kind of innovating in this category, huge potential, and then having whether it's trademark or IP, around the kind of innovation itself. But I think the other angle, right, is the brand and what you're doing and what the approach is and how you're doing with storytelling and even some of the imagery, like the design of the apparel itself, right? All very cool, sleek. Unique is not the right word for it, but totally new and fresh, anything that you would see in the kind of like sportswear apparel. How did you set out down that path of saying from like the design, the brand, even the kind of storytelling that goes around that, given your experience, right? Nike is obviously exceptional at storytelling. What is your thought on that? And what are you trying to convey as you continue to build that brand?
Nike is an unbelievable brand school, right? It's like the smartest people work there. And I had the privilege from very early on, over the 20 years I was there, in a number of roles, a lot of it in marketing and in brand, where you learn a way of thinking about the importance of the brand, but not just the surface of the brand. They actually, what's the underlying foundation that allows you to tell stories that connect with people? And for us, that's super important, that your brand is the articulation of the value you bring to people. And we think that we have something truly spectacular. We also love design. We love product design. We love brand design. We love making beautiful things. Omorpho is Greek. It means beautiful because we think this are beautiful solutions. And that spans across everything. It's how you come across through product, which is your foundational starting point. And we have incredible designs. Natalie Kendrin, our designer, is phenomenal, and have worked with the developers in our product team, all female, by the way, Liz Turso, Irene Alchivar. They're doing an incredible job of creating something that is this perfect marriage of form and function. But then you have to take that all the way. That's why we love typography. We love beautiful photography. We love creating something that makes you want to be a part of it, because I think that aesthetics is gone beyond just a nice to have. It's a foundational expectation that we have as consumers. So I think the holistic sum of all that is what your brand is. And then the stories, like you said, that you tell around that has to be authentic, and they have to come from a voice that where you understand that these people are passionate about it because they believe in it. And that's been really important. And obviously we know a thing or two about it. We have an incredible group of people working on this with extensive experience in the space.
Yeah, to that point, now as things continue to kind of scale up, have raised some capital over the course of, I think it was this year, maybe two different tranches, but certainly this year. What is the kind of size and scope of the team, and how do you anticipate that evolving as now the brand continues to grow?
What's so exciting about it is, we it's all in our hands. We get to decide what we do. But at the same time, we're tiny, right? And although we've raised great capital, and our lead investor has been amazing, KB Partners have been fantastic. But I think for us, it's awareness around this is really where we are putting a lot of energy and a lot of focus right now, because very few know who we are, and that's going to change over time. But it does take time, and it does take capital. It does take creativity. You have to have ideas. We used to say that we have no money, so we have to think. When you've got boatload of cash to throw against marketing, generally the quality, not always, but can tend to be that bar is lower because you can compensate for it with awareness. We don't have that luxury. So for us, this is now a lot about just creating an understanding of what this is and why it's better. And obviously having the product on amazing athletes helps a lot, because they become not only authenticators, but they also become megaphone for the brand. So really, really excited for that.
Yeah, I think maybe a couple more questions before we get you out of here. But you've kind of mentioned at two different times, both just now about like, when you don't have money, you have to think and you have to be creative and come up with these new ways. And I think initially when you were talking about the genesis of this idea and why it kind of, you didn't start it at Nike and bring it to them, you felt like not having those resources maybe, and having to build it from the ground up and think about how we're going to go about getting this out there. Maybe that's worth elaborating on, like the necessity, right? When you're, I don't want to say back against the wall, but when it's basically stripped down to how are we going to serve this need? And what is it that we're going to do that we're going to differentiate? Did you specifically think about that? Or is that just kind of a through line that's coming out? And why do you think that's so important from like we need to solve this problem. We need to be genuine in the way in which we go about it. And that's the way that it's going to make something like authentic and lasting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but for me, it was really a lot about it's the idea of raw conversion from idea to execution, right? And you have a small group of people that are incredibly passionate about what we're doing. But there is something very liberating about you're in a session in the morning and you make a call and you execute that at lunchtime. In a larger corporation, it doesn't work that way. It can't work that way because it's just it's the nature of the beast, right? Is if you're in a multi-billion-dollar company, it doesn't function that way. And there's no right or wrong. It's just for me personally and the team that we have here, we have lived in a world, everybody's have extensive background in the corporate world, and that's incredibly exciting in itself. But sometimes you just want to try a different way of doing things, and that's incredibly gratifying. You live and die by your decisions, right? Because the bigger you are, you might make some misses, some hits, misses, and eventually it's all going to even out. We don't have that luxury. That's what's exciting. There's the thrill of creating something and bringing it to the market, knowing that we don't have this massive safety net where we get five chances to execute this. And That's why we're so happy with the results, right? And then the constant belief from investors in us to give us the capital, where we're now in a really good position to amplify and do more. Because, but even with that, the marketing budgets we have compared to the big players out there is that's going to dwarf us. But that's what's exciting, because that makes you more creative and you have to think a little harder about it.
Yeah, that passion certainly comes through. And I think also that approach again, where it's like, I think oftentimes from a founder's perspective or somebody that's dreaming, right, of launching an idea, they're just like, oh, if I only had the money, if I only had the resource, if I only had all this capital. And you're kind of coming at it saying, like, that will help us get to where we need to go, but that is not going to get us there. And so we need, we need to prove this out and make sure that what actually is going to move the needle, like those are the things that we focus on. So I think it's a refreshing perspective. We kind of talked about obviously the evolution of this and thinking about getting it in front of more people, and now thinking about, you kind of said you want to make kind of more noise and awareness as it grows. What should listeners, what should we be on the lookout for as get out there and want to get it in the hands of more people?
First of all, I just want to spread the idea, because it's so remarkable. I think one of the most common questions we get is like, why has no one done this before? Because they try it, they love it, and that's, I think, a good signal that says we're onto something. So that I just want more people to know that we exist and try it. And when they go to homorpho.fit or just follow us on Instagram, at OMORPHO, you immediately get into, wow, why have I not seen this? So I think that's the key thing for us. And then obviously working with our tremendous ambassadors to get the message out there is a big deal. And this fall, we're going to come out with some pretty exciting news. I'm going to be a little cryptic because it's not obviously have to, but we are very excited for sort of phase two of what we're bringing to the market here shortly. And that's something to definitely be on the lookout for.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And just to, we'll help keep everybody in the loop, right? This fall, be on the lookout. And also, you said the website, amorpho.fit. So we definitely encourage people to check that out. And in terms of spreading the word, I really enjoyed the conversation today and certainly, learned a lot more about the why behind the brand and everything that's going on behind the scenes. So thanks for making some time to spread the word today.
Thank you so much for having me, Joe. I really enjoyed it.